What's up, guys? I'm nobody special, and I have a special guest today. I have Mr. Chuck Barone. Chuck is new to YouTube, and man, you've made a splash, Chuck. Your channel is growing really fast, probably one of the fastest growing channels in finance right now. And it's a pleasure to have you on. Welcome, sir.
Super excited to be here. Thanks, Jack.
All right. Now, I remember when I was just getting to know you and what you do. It's not just what you do, but where you do it that really stuck out as me. So give us a little bit of background about what you do.
Well, right now, and for the past, roughly 27 years, I'm a mortgage loan officer broker here in Las Vegas, Nevada. I started back in 95 when the world was still kind of almost normal. And I watched the whole sizzling fly up to 2008. I watched the aftermath of that through 2012. And here we are again, going to get to relive a different version of it.
So, mortgages in Las Vegas. And I tell you, talk about a microcosm of the real estate market. I remember my first trip to Las Vegas, the last time I was out there, it was late 2008. And I just remember seeing cranes all up and down the strip, and they were just stationary. They weren't moving. It was all of these big projects, especially in the north end of the strip, that just died on the vine when the market fell out. And what is it about Las Vegas that makes it so unique of a real estate market?
Well, I think that the amount of people that have been moving here, when I moved into Vegas back in the day, it was known as the town of second chances, where people could come, get a second chance, get a job. Back then the casino jobs were really, as opposed to the cost of living then, the casino jobs were really good. People could come here, make a living, restart their lives, or get away from areas like my family moved here from Buffalo, New York, which in those days was just dying, losing all the manufacturing jobs and everything that made that town. And we moved here, and my father got a chance to really start making some money, actually got to buy a Cadillac, and the rest is history. Now, Vegas is, I think what it is this town it's a transient town. A lot of people moving here, a lot of people coming here for job opportunities. It's a place where a blue collar guy can come, get work, and make a pretty fair living. A lot of these casino jobs, the laborer jobs, the dealers and some of the higher line casinos making a lot of money. The floor men and the guys on the floor in the casinos, they're probably making around 40 to 50,000 a year, which is not an amazing salary, but it's pretty steady. And if you and your wife are working in the industry, you're making enough money to start building a life with. And I think that's kind of what leads Vegas. And plus, for the longest time, Vegas was a town where you could buy a house and get a really good price. I mean, we were the home of the $100,000 brand new 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage starter house. And now, because of the demand for those and a whole millions of other factors, that same house in this town is about 450,000, which is a completely different scenario.
So, I mean, is it reasonable to say whatever the real estate market is doing, Vegas does it bigger? During a boom, Vegas really goes boom, and during a bust, Vegas, they tank hard, right? Is that
It seems like that's the trend. Back in the day before 2000, we used to almost consider Vegas to be recession proof because prices were reasonable here. We didn't get those big declines like our neighbors to the west in California got. People still come to Vegas even during recessions because they got to get away from all the bad stuff. So the town used to be a town that really wasn't affected that way. Now, as prices have gone up, and we literally, in a lot of cases, lead the market up and down, or in the top 10 almost every time up and down. So now we're kind of like a bellwether where as Vegas goes, so goes the rest of the country typically.
now? You put out a video a couple days ago. I think it was on Friday, and there was some pretty powerful language in there. You were talking about what mortgage rates have done and how they tipped over 6%. And I'm paraphrasing here, but you said something to the tune of the market in Vegas had ground to a halt. And you went on to talk about how we're projected to be, I think it was 7.95%, essentially 8% average mortgage rate by the end of this year. And you
Right,
said if we
according
were
to
to get to that level, we're looking at almost a third of the value off just haircut in home prices in a market like Vegas. Could you explain a little bit of what goes into the math? Because I think most people don't quite understand how a rise in interest rates of even a couple of percent can really just devastate home values.
Oh, it's shocking. And the speed at which it's all happening here is just so abrupt. The market's having difficulty digesting it right now. So you're getting a lot of mixed signals in the market. My calculations, the way I calculated it out, at the old rate, people could buy a $450,000 house with 5% down, a typical conventional starter home loan, and have a payment of around $2,000, which, although high, in my opinion at least, was was tolerable. They could do it. They could ratio out according to the lender, wouldn't have any issue with their debt to income ratios. So it was something that fit. It could still work. Now with these increases, that same house payment is about $3,400, which essentially knocks out people financing houses here, Jack. You know, the typical, the median household income here in Vegas is about $65,000. Well, when you have to commit, more than $35,000 to a mortgage payment, it just makes it impossible. They don't qualify for the loans anymore. Now, I guess we could move to a market where every buyer is a cash buyer. I just don't see how that's going to be feasible. So if we want people to be able to finance houses, the prices are going to have to adjust, or the rate is going to have to adjust, one or the other. There's nothing else. So if the Fed is determined to raise these rates, and I believe that Powell actually has a little bit of gumption right now to keep raising these rates to get this inflation under control. Houses are already unaffordable at 450,000 at 6. At 8, it's even more, way more unaffordable. And as the rates go up, you're knocking more and more of the market out where they can't afford to finance. I don't see that as a recipe for prices continuing to go up. I calculated it out at a $300,000 purchase at these rates. You're still looking at a payment of over $2,000 per month. So, in my mind, if rates are not going to adjust, the prices are going to have to. And for prices to make sense, now this is not opinion, this is simple mathematics here, right? For payments to make sense and for people to be able to fit into a conventional debt to income ratio, prices are going to have to come down pretty substantially.
Yeah, I mean that's some pretty powerful language there. We're talking about the same house, and you just mentioned something like a 35-40% increase in the monthly payment. Not no change in home price, but the payment going up by such an amount. And most people, if you're talking 50% of your take home income, you're not going to be able to make that work. Most people can't make that work. It's a recipe for disaster. And I
Right.
think
Well,
we're kind of seeing that. We got some data today. Pending home sales in May, we did see a little uptick in pending home sales today, 0.7% up, because we had a slight decrease in rates in the May data, and that will quickly correct with the June numbers. But year over year, 13% decline in pending home sales for the month of May. I mean, that's 13% decline in the number of homes being sold. That is a housing crash, is it not?
well, it's just getting started because a lot of those numbers you're getting are contracts that were signed for new houses 5, 6 months ago for delivery in May or delivery in June. And those people are going to get real sticker shock because typically when you buy a house and it's going to be built for you, you don't lock your rate for 6 months. It costs too much money to do that. So what's going to happen to a lot of people buying these new houses is that when they go now, the house is finished. It's time to actually, the house is going to be finished as a delivery date, and they go to arrange the financing. They're going to see some numbers that are staggeringly different than they were when they first signed the contract to buy the house. So I think we're going to see some people walking away from contracts to buy houses. I think that as the numbers are already indicating, the demand for houses is coming down. I think that the inventory being as small as it is will help keep support prices for at least a short time. But what's happening is people are already discounting their houses. In Vegas, 15% of the houses listed have already taken haircuts of $25,000 to $40,000 average, depending on where in town they are. So the hotter the market was, like in Las Vegas, there's an area in town called Summerlin. It's a fancy area, new area, very nice. They had the gigantic price run-ups, and their houses are selling for premium prices still. But now I've saw 14% of the listings in Summerlin have reduced their prices an average of $41,000. This is just in the very embryo stage of this, Jack. We're going to see this stuff. The cracks are already appearing in the dike. And it's just a matter of time before the water rushes through.
You see, this is exactly why I wanted to have you on for this interview, Chuck, because that's perfect right there, because we haven't seen prices move. Most markets aren't seeing any movement in prices yet, and it's got a lot of people scratching their heads because the number of sales are down, the rates are down. Why aren't prices down? If you're saying we're starting to see prices down in Vegas, that's a preview of what's to come in these other markets, right? Because Vegas is that big boom bust cycle kind of town. So if you're seeing that there now, that's, I think, what a lot of the other locals are going to start seeing soon in their
Well,
markets.
I would agree with that completely, because the price run up in Vegas was pretty significant, but it's been significant everywhere in the country right now. And depending on what you have as a foundation for employment in your areas, if you're a blue collar area like Vegas is, where the bulk of the employment is in the casinos and in service industry, these prices are unsustainable, and they're going to come down to earth where they belong.
Now, some famous last words you hear that you hate to hear in finance is, this time it's different, right? That's like carved on a lot of headstones, I'm sure. Is it different this time? Is it just 2007 all over again? Are we making the same mistake, or is there anything that sticks out at you this time around that says maybe it might go differently than it did in the last bust?
Well, I think it will, because people have skin in the game this time. Back in 2000, from say 2005 to the big kablooey, people were doing 100% financing. People with very marginal credit histories were getting 100% financing. They were even doing 100% financing on investment properties. And I had people coming to my office who wanted to buy 10, 15 of them. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. You're going to have a negative cash flow every month on this. And like, yeah, but look how much it's going up. So I think this time around, there's not as much speculation in the game as there was then. I think there's some. And a lot of investors are going to end up holding the bag, I think, on some of these properties they're holding. I think that, but the buyers who are buying houses to live in them are much better people qualified as far as their credit. Everybody has down payments in the game. Now, there's been some grant programs, but the down payment still gets provided by the grantor. So there's none of this 100% financing. There's none of this 80-20s we were doing back then with piggybacks and 80% first and 20% second. All of those loans, adjustable rate loans. Jack, to back up a second to 2008, I really used to pull my hair out, because I think a big driver of the crash back in 2008 was this 100% financing with these adjustable rate mortgages. What happened is the way the system worked and was intended to work was, you buy this house with 100% financing, you get a 2-year or a 3-year fixed rate. So for the first 2 or 3 years, your payment's stable. You know what it's going to be. The idea was, make the payment on time, build some equity, and at the end of that 2 or 3 years, you can refinance into a conventional loan. Okay, and that system worked beautifully until house values stopped going up. And what happened is, people were stuck in these houses, they were underwater, and now they couldn't refi out of these adjustable rate mortgages that started adjusting like crazy. And a lot of people could absorb the first rate increase, they could absorb the second increase, but by the time it got to keep going, people just couldn't hold on, and they didn't really see the market turning where they were going to be, even at a neutral level where they owed and the house values were equal. They were upside down, their payments were going up. They literally had every incentive in the world to walk away. I don't think we're going to see that this time around. It's going to be a normal correction. It's going to be pretty dramatic, I think, just because of the imbalances, but it's going to be because of the rates more than the situation with the crappy lending and all the stuff that was going on back in the day.
So no adjustables this time around, and those teaser rates expiring and the payments going up, that was a big ingredient last time.
In my
Also, you have a
opinion,
lot of equity this time around too, right? People, I think it was 185,000 was the average mortgage holder's equity at this point in his home. Um, Now, one thing that we are seeing now that we didn't have last time around is the institutional buyers. You mentioned cash buyers earlier. Um, we've got the Wall Street guys, the hedge funds, the pension funds. They're in there buying houses, right? I guess they've been
Yeah,
driven
the
in,
private equity.
yeah, and private equity. Now they've been driven in largely by the bond market. There's no yield to be had in the bond market. At least last year there wasn't. And they have aging clients who need regular income, so they're kind of chasing yield into the real estate market. Do you do you think the rising rate environment that we're in now, will we see some of that institutional money dry up and head back towards the bond market, or do you think that's here to stay? Is this something that's new?
It's a great question. I think that's going to be a question that's going to tell us where this market goes, because that institutional money has been one of the biggest drivers of these price increases. When you're spending other people's money, it's a lot easier to bid 25 or 50,000 over the list price than it is when you're spending your own, right? I think that, in my opinion, again, opinion here, okay, I think that they're in this market to stay. I think that they like the idea that they can do it way more quietly than they can do with a lot of the things they do on Wall Street. I think that they've had great success so far in driving returns for their investors. I think they're going to have a little bit of a correction here, but if anybody can weather the storm, those are the guys prepared to do it way more than the individual homeowner. So I believe they're here to stay.
One last question. I'm starting to see a lot of headlines about layoffs recently, especially in the last week or two. There's been some high profile job cuts at Netflix, at Coinbase. There was an aluminum smelter. I think it was in Ohio no, I'm sorry, it was Kentucky that had shut down 640 employees there. And we're starting to see more and more headlines of job cuts and unemployment increases. Are you seeing any of that in your local market out in Vegas? You guys have a lot of tourism there. Travel costs are going up, energy costs, airlines are more expensive. Have you noticed anything on the unemployment side of the equation in Vegas yet?
Not yet so much. A lot of the businesses in Vegas, and I'm sure all around the country, are very thinly staffed right now. I actually went to the mall yesterday, was shopping around, and I was talking to one of the guys in the mall. And I was surprised because seemed to be literally the only guy working in the store. And he said, yeah, they're laying staff back and giving them more part-time stuff, which benefits the company with wages and with benefits and all the stuff that goes with full-time people. So they're pushing more people into part-time spots. They're way more thinly staffed. So we haven't seen a lot of the unemployment stuff coming up here in Vegas. But again, the cracks are already on the wall. The casinos and the retail stuff seems to be doing okay right now. But the finance shops and mortgages already, boom, big cuts. Real estate companies, more and more people more of these agents who are marginal agents are going to get out of the business, stay out for a little while. Maybe when the market recovers, come back in and try to keep their license and come back in. So I think you're going to see it in finance first. You're already seeing it. Actually, I was reading in the Wall Street Journal this morning that Wall Street's now already starting to experience cuts from boom to bust in their hiring. I read that a lot of people who had job office offers are getting those offers rescinded now. So I think you're going to see the decline in hiring first, and then you'll see the job losses follow.
Well, Chuck, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today. Folks, the channel is Chuck Barone. I'm going to put a link down in the description below to check that out. Chuck puts out fantastic stuff. And again, he's got his finger directly on the pulse of the real estate market, especially in that all important Vegas market. So good things to come out of this channel. Chuck, any final words for us?
Just want to say thanks to you, Jack, for having me on the show. I look forward to please in the comments, or if you want to, get on my channel and ask me questions. I try to get on there every day and address those questions as much as I possibly can. I really appreciate you taking the time to have me on the show, Jack. It's a privilege.
All right. Thanks again, Chuck, for coming on. One more time, folks, that's Chuck Barone. Link in the description to his channel. And until next time, live small and dream big.